Hey everyone, it is me, Exicon Exertroya, and welcome to my Smack Studio Q&A, where people have asked questions based on my content in Smack Studio, or simply just my time in general that could also reflect to them. Now, before I get straight to the questions, I do want to say that I have shuffled them, so they're not in order. Now, let's begin. Do you plan on doing a character tutorial series or document someday based off your overall experience? Unfortunately, no. I do not have any plans whatsoever, nor will I, because I'm not the kind of person to have these kind of tutorials. I did try to attempt it once, but due to my disabilities, this was not possible. And plus, I really just don't have the time. I need to keep the momentum of what I do have, and I just don't see this happening anytime soon, let alone at all. What's your most favorite stage so far, and why? I can't really answer this question directly because of the fact that I'm not a guy with favorites, nor do I desire to have favorites. But I will say that depending on my mood does depend on what stage I would prefer. If I wanted to go with just a simple match, I would go with Battlegrounds. In the matters of serious 1v1, I would go with Final Stand. Straight up combos is the editor. And free-for-all, being more than against one opponent, that would go to Sky Sanctuary or the Secret Stage. So yeah, there we go. Any chance of a VTuber CPU tournament on Smack Studio? Yes, absolutely, but I must reach a creation total of 16 characters at minimum before I do so, because I'm making this a Tier 2 tournament. What was the hardest character you made so far, and why? Seth, it's Seth. He's the only character that I've worked on so far that has involvement with variables. He has a lot of start input listener actions, and it kind of took a while involving the second part of his Ultra, because I had to take 4 of the same sprite and position and rotate it numerous of times for frames. So yeah. Now I know people may say Gimmicks was the hardest, but the pre-spriteless stuff where I had to actually make the sprites by taking images of the 3D model, it wasn't that hard considering that the big issue was actually to pose the model. Everything else was, well, perfectly fine. But not as hard as working with Seth, because I have a hard time with variables. Any tips for a beginner on how to plan their character's moveset? Maybe some design tips? If your character has sprites, look at each sprite and see what would be worthy of a hitbox. Then try to implement that with an animation. Now, when it comes to the matter of moves that a character has but don't work with, say for instance, up air, you can definitely try to rotate your character, your sprites, try to make it work in the air by sticking upwards, or if there is another sprite that works well with the air even though it was not meant for, that move. And for instance, when I worked with Teddy, his down air and his up air are almost the same animation. It's his aerial B in Persona 4 Arena and Blaze Blue Cross Tag Battle. So I noticed that he was upside down and then he had his foot sticking upwards. So even though his down air was more reasonable to those animations, it also works with his up air if I remove the big foot frame. And yeah, it worked. Another one was Kung Fu Man. Like, his up air is just his neutral air. But the reason why I made it his up air is because usually people would jump into the air after doing up tilt on the ground. So it's easier for them to combo into that move and then go with down air immediately after inputting up air to bring the character back down for an extensive combo. So those are just some examples. Now, if your character does not have sprites, your imagination's the limit, and also your experience, because that's how I went with involving pre-spriteless characters like Gimmicks. So yeah, which character of yours do you think is the most accessible to play for beginner players? That would be Gimmicks. He's the closest in relation to a regular Smack Studio character and still has a combo game similar to other characters that would help you understand how the other characters of mine work. And he also has certain moves that would help you be conscious about what situation you are in order to adapt and understand about what you can do to win matches. So Gimmicks is definitely the go-to character for beginners involving the characters that I worked on. Do you plan on making characters that are featured in other games, whether officially or from workshops? It depends. If we're talking Super Smash Bros., no, unless, otherwise. If it's mods in Super Smash Bros. For the new characters that were made by the community, depends. Like, Beautiful Joe is a great example when it came to a certain part of his move. If we're talking about like Rivals of Ether with the workshop of characters, not directly like sprites from Rivals of Ether, but rather the characters themselves. Well, kinda, maybe, possibly. If someone is making or has made a character you planned on working on yourself, would you still do it? Out of all the questions for this Q&A, this is the toughest one. I will say this. I want to make characters that I've planned on, mainly because of the fact about my idea of how I'm going to work on characters from the fact that they are literally based on, combos, since that's the kind of guy I am. So when I know that someone else has already made a character I'm planning on, I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to go with my original plan and just keep going with it, because the reason why I made these characters was more related based on my other characters than specifically, the Smack Studio thing in general, because of how people make their characters that is different from me. And even if there are inspirations, which is perfectly fine, mine are basically intended for, my other characters to face against. So yeah, that's a tough one, because I don't want controversies happening or drama, but I will go with the original plan. You know what? This Q&A is saving me, because now people know that I don't have any ill intent. I'm just going with my own way because of my collection, not because of other people. So yeah, no hard feelings. In fact, no feelings at all. Just keep on going. Advice for those making their first character? Look at what the character editor has to offer before adding your desired character into development. Now, when it comes to that, you obviously need to know that you don't have to do everything that, Smack Studio has to offer. Just do enough to where you feel confident in adding a character and then work with it. And when you realize that certain things don't work, check to see if there's any workarounds and work from there. That's how I did it with Teddy when it came to, Kentoki Doji, when a projectile couldn't shoot a projectile, and then I switched to making Kentoki Doji as a second sprite layer for Teddy, and then that way there would only be one projectile, so that's good. Obviously you can add multiple projectiles, but a projectile just can't shoot a projectile, so yeah. But yeah, that's one way I learned about it, and then as time went on I learned about variables, simple ones. I've only worked with Boolean so far, but yeah, that's what I can say about that. You want to give gimmicks to characters, or is it hard enough to just make a basic moveset? I think I did add a gimmick involving Seth. I don't know if it's actually a gimmick, but if you parry his neutral special, you can't use it anymore unless you either parry the attack, use an ultra, or lose a stock. So I don't know if that's still a thing with the new update, but yeah. Now, if we don't count Seth, then obviously there are certain things that I will do. There is one character that I have in mind that will have the aspect or concept of gimmicks. So, yeah, I do want to. What's your favorite idea you'd like to execute? Like I mentioned before, I'm not really a guy who wants to have favorites, but I will say that I like it if the character that I work on is as closest to the game they originate from. If they don't really have any kind of fighting experience whatsoever, this means that it can be, a lot more interesting to work with, especially if they're a pre-spriteless character. So, kind of like, it's around there. Also, the fact of me trying to experiment with new things to learn in Smack Studio and see how I do it, yeah, that's pretty much it. Like a 90-10, so most of it is based on the originality or making combos interesting for a character, while still looking at what a character would do if they were in a fighting game to the best that I can, understand. If there's no answer to that, then I just do whatever. Is there any character archetypes you want to make soon, like a zoner or grappler? If I answer this question entirely on what's implied, I may actually be giving out too much info. But I will be saying that character archetypes that are famous, definitely I am working on, especially with one in progress for Wave 2. But then again, I need to know if there's actually multiple of them and I'm not conscious about it, so yeah. And now the final question. This one was never directly asked to me, but I'm pretty sure some people may have had this in their mind, so I'm going to go ahead and answer it. How did I find out about Smack Studio? Well, the thing is, I never really found it. It was gifted to me by a friend, and that friend is Noir Torrentiel. If it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be here. And it's all thanks to her that I have actually managed to make content where people were actually open into sharing their thoughts about my creativity. And the fact that I'm making trailers like these. I've never really made trailers like these before. So, yeah, that is it. I would like to thank everyone so much for listening and, just listening to me answer these questions, watching the video, and that will be it for this Q&A. So stay tuned for more Smack Studio information. I'm trying my best on working on the next set of characters. So thank you all, and I'll see you all next time. May the best be upon all of you. Take care.